someone shared this article, by this individual, this academic, a Pakistani academic called Zahid Mughal. To be honest, I've not personally, I don't know him personally, nor have I ever heard of him. I'm not familiar with his work. So, I mean, this was the first time I got to read something by him, written by him, and. But prior to this article, I mean, I had not even heard of him, and I hadn't even read anything by him. But there were people who who were saying that he is basically attempting to defend Ghazali against my objections, against my refutation of Ghazali's tahafut, or the incoherence of the incoherence, or incoherence of the philosopher. Sorry, tahafut the philosopher. The incoherence of the incoherence is a subsequent work which was penned by the Andalusian peripatetic philosopher Ibn Rushd, or Averroes, as he's more popularly known in the West. So yeah, I mean, like I when I wrote the critique, against Ghazali's Tahafut. So now, if you're a philosophy student, so you must be aware that Ghazali's Tahafut is basically not an expression of his own beliefs. Okay, so I mean, the ideas that Ghazali is expressing, or the notions that he discusses in the Tahafut, okay, he's basically doing that to refute the doctrines or the views held or espoused by the philosophers. And by the philosophers, he is primarily concerned with or talking about, the ideas or the theories of Farabi and Avicenna, the two peripatetic masters. Okay, so he's basically concerned with refuting or discussing the opinions held by the Islamic peripatetics. Okay, the Islamic peripatetics are, obviously, I mean, if you're aware of your history, they are the disciples and the followers of the manhaj, or the way of Aristotle, the first teacher, Muallim Awwal. Okay, Arastu. So Ghazali is basically in the Tahafut discussing, or trying, or seeking to rebut or refute the doctrines of Avicenna and Farabi. Okay, primarily Avicenna. Okay, he so Tahafut is not actually an expression of his own beliefs. Okay, if you want to find out Ghazali's own beliefs, so you would have to read works such as the Al-Iqtisad. Okay, uh, Al-Iqtisad is a better expression of his own ideas, or his own beliefs. Okay. Anyways, so when I wrote my own critique, so my critique is basically an intellectual exercise, So I have, huge love for Ghazali, as you all are aware. Okay, so I was basically, my critique is a love letter, okay, to Ghazali. So it is an expression of my love, for Ghazali, and it is basically an intellectual exercise that I was engaging in. Now, I was very well aware of the fact that Tahafut was not an expression of Ghazali's own beliefs. So when I was writing my critique, okay, I, I'm seeking to basically, I'm seeking to refute his arguments, his dalail, okay, or the objections that he is raising against Avicenna, or against the Islamic peripatetics, okay. So I come across this article by this academic, and there were people who wanted to know that how I would respond to it. But obviously, having read the article, I was not responding to it deliberately because I would be very honest, and we would discuss why as we go into the technical details of it, the nitty-gritty of it. I was not responding. Why? Because the quality of the article is so. I mean, I would be very honest, and I'm not saying this because it is directed against me. Okay, I appreciate the effort, but the effort, it's a very poor attempt. It's pathetic as far as, from a qualitative perspective. So, and why that is so? So let us get into that. Okay. Now, the author has, he has written this article in Urdu. So I would have to read some of the excerpts, okay, some of the, the relevant lines, and then I would explain that uh, why his critique fails right from the start and doesn't even begin, to it doesn't even begin to lift off, basically. Okay, not to speak of, trying to engage with my critique or trying to refute my objections against Ghazali's refutation of the philosophers. So the thing is that the author says, and I'm going to read the excerpt, the relevant excerpt later. So he says, in the beginning, when he's talking about, when he's trying to represent Avicenna's doctrines or Avicenna's view, so he begins by saying that that since the necessary being for since God for Avicenna is the necessary being, and the necessary being is one. Okay, therefore, therefore, only a single effect, okay, can emanate from the necessary being. Now this is a very misleading and a very incomplete expression of the true Avicennan doctrine. Now, first, allow me to read what he has actually written. He says, and I'm going to read. I'll have to read it, in Urdu, okay, because obviously the article is in Urdu. I may translate it later. In fact, I've already done that. But allow me to read it in Urdu. So he says that नाक़िद का एतराज़ समझने के लिए, नाक़िद, by नाक़िद over here he's actually referring to me, that is Hasnain Naqvi. So नाक़िद का एतराज़ समझने के लिए मुख्तसरन इब्न सीना का नज़रिया पेश नज़र रहना ज़रूरी है. इब्न सीना न्यू अफलातूनी यानी कि न्यू प्लेटोनिक फ़िक्र के तहत कहते हैं कि ज़ात बारी वाजिबुल वजूद है, necessary in itself, necessary being. ठीक है, और चूंकि वो वाहिद है, लिहाजा वाहिद से एक ही शय का सुदूर हुआ. ठीक है, वो वाहिद शय अक्ल अव्वल है. Now I'm going to, that is how he begins to explain Avicenna's doctrine concerning the rule of one. Okay. Now, but the thing is that this is an extremely, I would say, misleading and an incomplete expression of the true Avicennan doctrine. Why that is so? Because Avicenna, I mean, even when you say Wahid, so in Islamic metaphysics, Wahid itself, that is one itself, has many different kinds. There are many different kinds of one in Islamic philosophy. So there is Wahid, Wahid bil jins, okay, or one in genus. For instance, both man and a horse are wahid bil jins, okay, because they're both animals, okay, they both belong to the genus Animalia. Similarly, you have wahid bil no, okay, or one in species, okay. For instance, me and any other human being, okay, so we are one in species, so we are wahid bil no. And then you have wahid wahid bil adad, okay, or one in number, that is numerically one. So every individual is Wahid, even though he may be a composite of a plurality of distinct parts or components from a certain different aspect, but that doesn't negate the fact that he is still one, numerically. Okay, that is individually speaking. So Wahid, so there is Wahid bil no, there is Wahid bil jins, and there is Wahid bil adad. Okay, and then there is the Wahdat Haqqa Matlaqa, or Wahdat Zati. Okay, which is the kind of oneness that that the philosophers ascribe to the necessary in itself. That is the first truth, or the necessary being. So the necessary being is the absolute one, or wahdate haqqa matlaqa, okay, or wahdate zati. His oneness is essential. Okay, so for Avicenna, God, or the necessary being, is not simply or not just one, but he is one in every respect. That is, he's not just Wahid, he is Wahid min Jami'ul Jihad. That is one in every respect, or one in every aspect. Okay? So if you say that since the necessary being is Wahid, therefore, nothing but one can emanate in a proximate manner from the essence of the necessary being, and you say that this is the belief of Avicenna, that would be a very misleading and, with all due respect, a very incomplete expression of the true Avicennan doctrine. Okay, why? Because even the first intellect is Wahid. Okay, it is Wahid bil Adad. Okay, even the second intellect is Wahid. It is Wahid bil Adad. Okay, every intellect is Wahid in a certain sense. So when you say God is Wahid, so what kind of Wahid are you talking about? Okay, Avicenna, when he states that the necessary being is one, that is, the necessary being is Wahid, he's not trying to say that the necessary being is Wahid bil jins, or that the necessary being is Wahid bil no. Why? Because the necessary being has no genus. Okay, why? Because jins or genus is a quiddity. Okay, that is commonly shared by a plurality of distinct species. Okay, so the necessary being has no quiddity, apart from its own existence. Okay, therefore he has no genus. Okay, similarly, the necessary being cannot be Wahid bil no. Okay, why? Because he has no species. Okay, because every a species or a no is a quiddity. Okay, that is specific, to a particular species. Okay, so a necessary being has no quiddity distinct from his own existence, his hawiya. Okay, so since he has no quiddity, he can neither be one in genus, that is Wahid bil jins, nor can he be one in species. Okay, that is Wahid bil no. Okay, and nor can he be numerically one. Okay, so he is not Wahid bil adad as well. Although that, I must say that that is not the Avicennan doctrine. That is the Sadrian doctrine. According to Avicenna, God is Wahid bil adad. Okay, so the author does not actually makes clear, okay, the reason why a plurality of disparate entities cannot emanate, or in a proximate or a direct manner, from the essence of the necessary being. The reason why when Avicenna says that God is Wahid, by that he means that he is Wahid min Jami ul Jihad, as he makes it very clear in his works, such as the Shifa. Okay, that God is one in every respect. Okay, so he's completely devoid of composition and plurality in all aspects. Okay, so if you simply leave it at that, if you simply say that God is Wahid, and since he's Wahid, therefore nothing but one can emanate from his essence, and you ascribe this belief or doctrine to Avicenna, so someone like me, would come, has every right to come up and say that this is a very misleading and an incomplete expression of the true Avicennan doctrine. Because when Avicenna says that God is one, he doesn't mean God is one in genus, or God is one in species, okay? But what he actually is trying to say is that God is one in every respect, okay? God is Wahid min Jamiul Jihad. And because he is such, therefore, nothing but one can emanate in a proximate manner from his essence, okay? So this is the very first error that he commits in laying out the doctrine of Avicenna. And then he goes on to say that, and I would be reading in Urdu, okay? So he says that वो वाहिद शय अक्ल अव्वल है, फिर इस अक्ल अव्वल से नौ मजीद उकूल जाहिर हुई, जिनसे आलम में कसरत जाहिर हुई, यूं कुल मिलाकर ये 10 उकूल उकूल अशरा बनी। इन 10 में से इब्तिदाई 9 उकूल कदीम है, यानी इटर्नल है, ठीक है, यानी उनकी कोई ज़मानी इब्तिदा नहीं कि ये अदम से वजूद पजीर नहीं हुई बल्कि अजल से मौजूद है। इन नौ उकूल का ज़हूर दरअसल अफलाक और सय्या। अच्छा, now hold on. What he says is that, you know, there are, according to Avicenna, okay, since he's talking about Avicenna's belief, so he says that according to Avicenna, there is a hierarchy, or there is a chain or a series of 10 immaterial intellects that emanate from the essence of the truth, okay? One from the other. That is, the first intellect emanates in a proximate manner from the essence of the first truth, and then the second intellect from from the first intellect, and so on and so forth, until we arrive at the 10th intellect. Now, the author says that the first 9 of these 10 immaterial intellects are temporally eternal, or Qadim Zamani. Okay. Now that is absolutely inaccurate. That is not what the philosophers believe in. Okay. Well, I mean, the author must know that according to the philosophers, there are 5 distinct substances. Okay. Matter, form, body, soul, and the intellect. Okay. The intellect is defined as an absolutely immaterial substance, i.e., uh, uh, the intellect, okay, according to the philosophers, is a substance that is absolutely devoid of both matter as well as material properties or material attributes, okay? And since motion is defined as the transition of a thing from potentiality to actuality, and potentiality resides or inheres within matter. Therefore, that which is immaterial in an absolute sense, in other words, completely devoid of both matter and material properties, is also devoid of motion. Okay, so therefore, that which is that which is intellectual in its substance, that is, that which is intelligible, okay, in its substance, or that which is an intellect, can have no motion. It cannot be mobile. It cannot be subject to change. It is immutable. Okay. And since it is such, therefore, it cannot be temporally originated. Okay. Therefore, none of the 10 immaterial intellects, okay, can be temporally originated. Okay. Whereas according to the author, the first 9 of these immaterial intellects that emanate from the essence of the one are temporally eternal, but the last, that is the 10th immaterial intellect, is temporally originated. That is absolutely false straight off. Okay, he's absolutely incorrect over here. He's misrepresenting the doctrines and the beliefs of Avicenna. I'm not saying that he's doing it, maliciously or deliberately. No, that is not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that the author is ignorant of the true doctrine held by the philosophers, by the true doctrine espoused by Avicenna and Farabi. When the philosophers say that something, that this substance is an intellect, okay, it means that that substance is absolutely immaterial. Okay, it means that it is absolutely devoid of both matter and material properties. And since it is devoid of matter, okay, and motion pertains to that which is material, therefore an intellectual substance or an intellect, okay, cannot be mobile, it cannot be changeable, it has to be an immutable reality, and that which is immutable cannot be temporally originated, okay, because that which is temporally originated, its existence, okay, has to be preceded by time, okay, and by motion, because time cannot exist without motion, okay, and by matter, because motion pertains to that which is material, okay. So everything temporally originated is preceded by motion, okay, by time, motion, and matter, whereas an intellect, okay, as we have just explained and reiterated again over and over again, that a substance that is absolutely devoid of matter and material properties is an intellect, and therefore every intellect is, since it is absolutely immaterial, it cannot be subject to time, it is atemporal in its reality, in nature, okay, it doesn't exist within time, and since it transcends the spatiotemporal dimension or the spatiotemporal realm, therefore it cannot be temporally originated. So the author is absolutely, I mean, like, he's made a huge blunder over here in considering the last of the 10 immaterial intellects to be temporally originated, okay, because if it is temporally originated, then it is material, if it is material, then it cannot be an intellect, whereas according to the philosophers, the 10th substance, okay, the 10th effect that emanates, okay, in a through an intermediate, in an intermediate manner, from the essence of the first truth, is an absolutely immaterial substance or an intellect. Okay, so this is the second error that he commits over here. The first being, as I was speaking earlier, that he says that since the necessary being is wahid, therefore nothing but one can emanate from his essence. That is also a very a misleading and an incomplete expression of the true Avicennan doctrine. It is not just because the necessary being is wahid that nothing but one can emanate in a proximate manner from his essence, but it is, according to Avicenna, it is because he is wahid min jami'ul jihad that nothing but one can emanate in a proximate manner from his essence. Okay, now proceeding further, the author, I'll have to once again, read the Urdu version of his writing over here. He says that, uh, yeah, he says that इस निज़ाम में इन नौ अक्लों का ज़हूर दरअसल अफलाक और सैयारों की तहों की सूरत में हुआ. This is absolutely preposterous. This is so hilarious. I mean, this, I have nothing but, I can only, offer my commiserations. I have nothing but absolute pity for the author. What he's trying to say is that the first nine, immaterial intellects, they they manifest themselves as the planetary spheres, okay, and अफलाक और सैयारों की तहों की सूरत में हुआ. Okay, the first nine immaterial intellects, they manifest themselves as the planetary spheres, okay, the celestial spheres, okay. Now this is absolute rubbish, okay. The nine immaterial intellects do not manifest themselves as the celestial spheres. In fact, the celestial spheres, okay, according to Avicenna, since the first intellect, it is one in number, that is, it is wahid bil adad, but since it is contingent and it has a quiddity that is distinct and separate from its existence, therefore it is an intellectual composite of its essence and existence. Okay, as is every contingent. Every contingent is an intellectual composite, a murakkab zehni of wujud and mahiya, of existence and essence. Okay, and therefore, since it intellects it's the first truth, okay, so, and it intellects its own quiddity, and it intellects its own existence, therefore it is a plurality of three distinct aspects. Okay, now the aspect in which it intellects the first truth or contemplates it's the cause of its existence, which is God. Okay, the second intellect emanates from this aspect, and the aspect in which it intellects its own existence, okay, a celestial sphere, emanates from this aspect. Okay, and the aspect in which it intellects its own quiddity, okay, uh, uh, sorry, the aspect in which it intellects its own existence, okay, a soul, okay, a nafs, okay, emanates from this aspect, and the aspect in which it intellects its own quiddity, a celestial sphere, emanates from this aspect. Okay, so from each of the three distinct aspects within the essence of the first intellect, a different substance emanates from each aspect. Okay, from the aspect in which it emanates its cause, that is God. Okay, an intellect, that is the second intellect, emanates from that aspect. The aspect in which it intellects its own existence, a soul, emanates from that aspect, and the aspect in which it intellects its quiddity, a celestial sphere, emanates from that aspect. Okay, so now you have these three distinct aspects in the essence of the first intellect. Okay, okay, now, and similarly, the number of aspects keeps on increasing as you go down the hierarchy. Okay, so the first intellect does not manifest itself as a celestial sphere. The celestial sphere in the Avicennan cosmological model is an altogether different reality. It is not, the first intellect does not manifest itself as a celestial sphere. In fact, the celestial sphere is an effect, it is a ma'lul of the first intellect. So the author, okay, I've so far highlighted that he commits three grave errors. The first error being, and I'm going to recapitulate over here, okay, the first error being that when he says that since the necessary being is wahid, okay, therefore nothing but one can emanate in a proximate manner. Nothing, he doesn't say in a proximate manner, but nothing but one can emanate from the necessary being. This is, as I said earlier, an incomplete and a misleading expression of the true Avicennan doctrine. Why? As I've just explained, that Wahid in Islamic metaphysics has many different types and kinds. There is Wahid bil Jins, there is Wahid bil No, there is Wahid bil Adad, and there is the Wahdat Matlaqa, Wahdat Haqqa Matlaqa, or the Wahdat Zatiyah. According to Avicenna, when Avicenna says that God is, or the necessary being, is Wahid, by that he means that he is Wahid min Jamiul Jihad. Okay, so if you say that since the necessary being is Wahid, okay, and therefore nothing but one can emanate from his essence, and you leave it at that, so that would be an extremely misleading expression of the true Avicennan doctrine. What he ought to have stated is that since, according to Avicenna, God is Wahid min Jamiul Jihad, therefore, okay, and when you say that he is Wahid min Jamiul Jihad, you're basically negating the other kinds of unities. So what you're trying to say that God is not Wahid bil Jins, God is not Wahid bil No, and God is not Wahid bil Mawdu, and all the other kinds of unities, okay, that are enumerated in Islamic metaphysics. He is Wahid min Jamiul Jihad. Okay, so according to Avicenna, God is not just Wahid. Okay, because even the first intellect is Wahid in a certain sense. The first intellect is Wahid bil Adad. Okay, but for Avicenna, okay, God is Wahid min Jamiul Jihad. And since he is wahid min jamiul jihad, therefore, nothing but one can emanate from his essence. That is not what the author has stated in his write-up. Okay, he leaves it at wahid. But my contention over here is that even the first intellect is wahid. Okay, so but a plurality can emanate, okay, in approximate manner from the essence of the first intellect, right? Okay, so that is not what Avicenna is trying to say. What, according to Avicenna, the reason why nothing but one can emanate in approximate manner from the essence of the first truth is because the first truth is wahid min jamiul jihad, or he is one in every respect. I.e., the first truth is absolutely simple. So that is the first error. The second error being that the author states that that out of the 10 immaterial, the hierarchy of the 10 immaterial intellects, nine of the first, the first nine of these 10 immaterial intellects are eternal, temporally eternal, qadim zamani. Okay. In other words, what he's trying to say is that the last of these 10 immaterial intellects is temporally originated. But once again, that is also a very, very grave error. That is a huge error. That is not what Avicenna or not what the philosophers say. When, according to the philosophers, as I've just explained, there are five distinct kind of substances. So there is matter, there is form, there is body, there is soul, and then there is the intellect. So madda, wasura, jism, nafs, and aql. Okay, so Aql in Islamic metaphysics is defined as an absolutely immaterial substance, okay, that is completely devoid of both matter and material attributes, okay. And since time in the Aristotelian sense is the transition of a thing, okay, from time is a measure of motion, and motion is the transition of a thing from potentiality towards actuality, and potentiality inheres within matter. Therefore, that which is immaterial, okay, cannot exist within time. It cannot be mobile. It cannot suffer change or be subject to change. Okay, it cannot be a material substrate. Okay, anything that is deemed to be an intelligible substance, i.e. an aql, okay, has to be absolutely immaterial. Okay, and if it is absolutely immaterial, it cannot be subject to motion. Okay, it cannot have matter, and since motion pertains to matter, okay, it cannot be subject to motion, and since time is a measure of motion, so it cannot be temporal, i.e. anything that transcends the spatio-temporal dimension, anything that is an intellectual substance, and is therefore absolutely immaterial, okay, cannot be subject to change, cannot be mobile, cannot be temporal. It has to be atemporal. Therefore, there cannot be an intellect that is temporally originated. That will be a contradiction in terms. Okay, to speak of an intellectual substance, okay, that constitutes the vertical hierarchy of intellects that we are referring to, okay, is to speak of an atemporal reality or entity. Okay, and to say that one of these intellectual substances is temporally originated, that is a contradiction in terms. If it is temporally originated, then it means its existence, according to the philosophers, must be preceded, because we're talking about the view of the philosophers, right? So if it is temporally originated, so its existence must be preceded by both time, matter, and motion. Okay, but if its existence is preceded by time, matter, and motion, then that thing exists within time. And if it exists within time, okay, it is material. It cannot be an absolutely immaterial substance. So it is, therefore it is a contradiction in terms to posit a substance that is immaterial, that is an intellect, and yet temporally originated. So the author is not aware of the true Avicennan doctrine. Okay, and that is a pity, because had he been aware, so he would have known that nothing intellectual, an intellectual substance, by its very nature, transcends the spatio-temporal dimension, transcends, the realm of time and space, and therefore is by its very nature atemporal. It cannot be subject to change. It cannot be subject to time. Why? Because it is devoid, completely devoid of matter and material properties. Now, the third error that he makes is that he says that the first nine of these vertical immaterial intellects manifest themselves as the celestial spheres. Okay, as I just quoted from his article, that is also completely false. Okay, these immaterial intellects are immaterial. Okay, so to posit that they manifest themselves as celestial spheres, I mean, the celestial spheres are an effect in the Avicennan cosmological model. The celestial spheres, or the nufus falakiya, or the aflak, okay, are the effects of these intellects. Okay, as I was just stating, that the aql awwal, or the first intellect, while it is true that it is numerically one, or wahid bil adad, and yet it contains a plurality of distinct aspects. It is kasirul jihad, kasirul jahdi, kasirul jihad, mutakasirul jihad. Okay, so there is the aspect, from the aspect in which it intellects its cause, that is the first cause, that is God. Okay, an intellect emanates from that aspect. Okay, that is the second intellect. Okay, then the aspect in which it intellects its existence, a soul emanates from that aspect. Okay, or a nafs. And the aspect in which it intellects its quiddity, okay, is celestial sphere. Okay, or a falak emanates, okay, from that aspect. Okay, so the celestial spheres are basically effects of these intellects, of these immaterial intellects. Okay, they are it's not that these intellects manifest themselves as the spheres. The spheres are effects of these intellects. Okay, now moving forward, he says, the author says, that is, सिर्फ आखिरी यानी 10वीं अक्ल, अक्ली तय, सिर्फ आखिरी यानी 10वीं अक्ली तय में इब्दा और तगय्युर का उसूल जारी है. Yani in other words, the author is trying to say that the last of these vertical immaterial intellects, that is the 10th intellect, is subject to change. It is subject to motion. Okay, I would repeat that according to the author, the last of these vertical immaterial intellects, that is the 10th intellect, is subject to change, and it is subject to motion. But once again, as I just explained earlier, this this is an absolutely misleading, incorrect, inaccurate, and erroneous expression of the true doctrine of the philosophers, of the true beliefs of Avicenna or Farabi, or any philosopher for that matter, even the Sadrians or the Ishraqis, the Illuminationists. Why? Because as I explained earlier, okay, for the philosophers, every intellect, okay, is, since it is an immutable reality, since it is absolutely immaterial, therefore it transcends the spatio-temporal dimension and is therefore immobile. It is immutable, so there can be no change within an intellectual substance. Okay, so uh, all each and every single one of the intellects that constitute the vertical hierarchy of intellects, and each and every single one of the horizontal immaterial intellects, regardless of whether they are uqul tuliya mujarrada or uqul mujarrada aradiya, each and every single intellect is transcendent in its character, i.e., that it lies beyond the spatio-temporal dimension. It is atemporal, it is immobile, it is immutable. Therefore, there can be no change within any intellect. And therefore, the author commits an extremely grave error, and this is the fourth of his errors that I've just enumerated, when he says that there is change in the 10th intellect, as I just read, from his article. So, and this is just him explaining the Avicennan doctrine. I mean, I've not even started, his when he goes on to discuss my first objection, in my series, against Ghazali's Tahafut. So this is him expressing Avicenna's doctrine, and he has made four grave errors, huge errors, that basically contradict the beliefs of Avicenna. First, in his incomplete expression of what Avicenna truly means by the rule of one, okay, or how Avicenna understands the rule of one. So he leaves it incomplete by saying that since God is Wahid, therefore nothing but one can emanate. That is not what Avicenna is trying to say. Even the first intellect is Wahid in a certain sense. It is numerically one. It is Wahid bil adad. According to Avicenna, the reason why nothing but one can emanate from the essence of the first truth, or the reason why the philosophers assert and affirm that la yasdiru anil wahid illa al wahid, is because God is absolutely simple in every respect. He is basit min jamiul jihad. He is wahid in every respect. He is wahid min jamiul jihad. That that is where the author errs in leaving his representation of the Avicennan, or his expression of the Avicennan doctrine, incomplete. The second error that he commits is when he states that the tenth of the tenth intellect of these 10 intellects that emanate from the essence of the first truth is temporally originated. Once again, that is a huge, grave error. Why? Because according to the
Um,
philosophers, each and every
Stanley, can I say
single one
something?
of these, each and every single one of these immaterial intellects is temporally eternal. None of the intellects is temporally originated. Okay, so none of the intellect is hadis is zamani. The third error that he makes is the third error that he commits in his expression of the Avicennan doctrine is when he states that these intellects manifest themselves as the celestial spheres. Now, once again, that is absolutely erroneous. The celestial spheres, as I just explained, are the effects or the ma'alil of the intellects. Okay, so the intellects do not manifest themselves as the celestial spheres. The fourth error that he commits is when he states that change occurs in the 10th intellect. Now, once again, there is a contradiction in terms. Each and every single one of these intellectual substances is absolutely immaterial, atemporal, and immobile. No change occurs in any single one of them. Now, moving on.
I think Stanley, if I had a question. Yeah, I just want to say one thing. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Waalaikum assalam.
Alayka salam, alayka salam. But Rovefa, if you can just hold your question, because I'm still not through with the list of. I think I would be able to complete it within. Just give me some more time, and then obviously, I mean, like we
Uh,
would have a discussion. And
Actually,
in fact,
Stanley, the thing is,
since tomorrow is a
sorry
weekend,
to interrupt you.
we have Sunday, so we can even have another session within a few hours, and definitely, like, we can have a detailed discussion, in-depth discussion. So there is no problem with that. But I would
Um,
like to complete,
but Stanley, the thing is,
with my.
I want to say one thing. Actually, I don't have any
No,
question.
you would have to hold the
Um,
thought. No, I'm sorry. You would have to hold the thought. I would like to complete first, and then we can discuss further. Okay. So moving on. He says that. Uh, Acha. Now, this is another huge error that he makes over here. Now, mind you, he is basically laying out the Avicennan doctrine. So he's not talking about what the mutakallimun or the theologians think about the Avicennan doctrine. Okay, he's basically laying out or explaining what Avicenna's cosmology is. Towards the end of his expression, or his explanation of the Avicennan doctrine, he states, and I'm going to quote directly from the article itself, as I've just done in all the other cases. He says that, I'm quoting. He says that यहाँ याद रहे कि इब्न सीना के निज़ाम में खुदा अक्ल अव्वल का खालिक नहीं है, बल्कि वो इससे जाहिर यानी एमिनेट हुई है. Now hold on, that is absolutely false. That is not true. That is once again a very, very huge error. That is not what Avicenna believes concerning God. For the philosophers, the term Khaliq is used for an illat wujudiya, illat fili. Okay, for the philosophers, God is the illat fili of each and every single one of the immaterial intellects, and then whatever follows therefrom. So God is the illate fili, okay, the proximate efficient cause of the first intellect, okay, and if he is the illate fili, he is the creator, okay. Now he is using the term creator in the theological sense, in the sense it is used by the mutakallimun. For the mutakallimun, the term khalik, okay, by the term khalik, they mean an agent, a file whose effect is not a necessary consequence of his essence. But that is not what Avicenna believes in. According to Avicenna, okay, by Khalik, he means the illate fili, or the efficient cause, okay, the illate tamma, or the illate kamila, okay. Is God the illat tamma of the first intellect according to Avicenna? Obviously he is. Is God the illat fili, or the efficient cause of the first intellect? Obviously he is. So if he is the efficient cause, if he is the illat fili, or the illat tamma of the first intellect, then he is the khalik of the first intellect. It makes no difference whether the first intellect is a necessary consequence of the essence of God, or is not a necessary consequence of the essence of God. Okay, that is besides the point. Okay, the point over here is that God is the efficient cause, or the illate fili, of the existence of the first intellect. And if that is true, okay, for Avicenna, then for Avicenna, God is the creator or the cause of the first intellect. Okay, but yes, if by Khalik you mean Khalik in the sense in which the Mutakallimun use this term, so the philosophers do not agree with that understanding. According to the Mutakallimun, as I just explained, by Khalik they mean an agent or a file whose effect is not a necessary consequence of its essence. So when they're talking about the divine cause or the divine creator, so according to them, God is an agent whose effect is not a necessary consequence of his essence. Okay, but that is the belief or the doctrine of the theologians, the mutakallimun. This belief or this doctrine has nothing to do with the belief of Avicenna or the philosophers. According to the philosophers, an efficient cause, a perfect cause, is a creator. Okay, so since God is the efficient cause, since he is the perfect cause of the first intellect, therefore he is the creator. And the author should have faithfully represented, he should have been faithful in his representation of the Avicennan doctrine, provided he was aware of the Avicennan doctrine in the first place. Okay, but the author is either ignorant of the Avicenna's true doctrine, or being cognizant of that doctrine, he is maliciously or deliberately seeking to misrepresent the true belief of Avicenna, which is false. That is not what Avicenna says. In other words, what the author is trying to say is that for Avicenna, God is not a Khalik. That is false. That is rubbish. According to Avicenna, God is the Khalik of everything that exists save him. So everything contingent has a Khalik. That is ultimately God. Okay, so it makes no difference whether something is a necessary consequence of his essence or it's not a necessary consequence of his essence. God is the illat fili, or the illat ula, of everything that exists save his essence. Period. Now, now moving forward. Now moving forward. The author states that यानी आलम की तख्लीक खुदा का हाँ, खुदा अक्ल अव्वल का खालिक नहीं बल्कि वो इससे जाहिर होती है. अक्ल अव्वल इससे जाहिर होती है. Well, I mean, like, if we are going to be, if we are going to have a very nuanced approach, towards things, then I would have to correct the author over here. He ought to have used the word sadir, because the philosophers believe in the theory of sudur, the theory of emanation. He does mention the term emanate within brackets, okay, but in his Urdu expression he says zahir. Okay, he ought to have used the term sadir. Okay, anyways, okay. बिल्कुल इसी तरह जैसे आग रोशनी से जाहिर होती है, ठीक है, ले यानी आलम की तख्लीक खुदा का इरादी व इख्तियारी फेल नहीं है. Once again, let me remind the author that he is here representing, or trying to represent, okay, the belief of Avicenna and his disciples. So, does he really think that according to Avicenna, God did not create the first intellect out of his own free will? Is that what Avicenna believes in? That is absolutely false. That is a calumny and a lie that he's attributing to Avicenna, provided he is aware of the true doctrine of Avicenna. But in all fairness to the author and in all honesty, I sincerely believe that the author is not fully aware and not cognizant of the true beliefs and the true doctrines of Avicenna. In fact, I'm pretty sure that he has not even read a single work by the Sheikh. Okay, and by reading over here, I mean reading with understanding. Okay, reading with comprehension. So Avicenna does not state anywhere in any one of his works that God, creates or causes or existentiates the first intellect, not out of his own free will. That is not what Avicenna believes in. According to Avicenna, God, each and every single act of God, okay, is an expression of his free will. But yes, what does Avicenna mean by will? According to Avicenna, God's will is not an attribute that is superadded and that is additional to his essence. According to Avicenna, God's will is identical to his essence, like every other attribute of God, like his power, like his life, like his knowledge. Okay, so God's will is identical to the divine essence and to every other attribute. So for God to exist is to will. Okay, for God to exist is to will, and since he exists eternally, therefore he wills eternally, and therefore that which is willed is eternal. Okay, that is the true doctrine of Avicenna. And God wills in a free manner. His will is absolutely free. But what does Avicenna mean by God's will being free? Okay, freedom or free will for the philosophers means to do what one wills and to refrain from doing that which one does not will. That's it. Okay, that is all that the philosophers mean by free will. Okay, so God does what he wills, okay, and does so eternally, and refrains from doing that which he does not will and does so eternally. So that which is not willed by God, okay, never comes into existence. Okay, and that which is willed by God does so eternally. I mean, it exists eternally. Okay, So that is once again this. I think it was the sixth error that I've just explained in the author's expression of the Avicennan doctrine. Okay, now this is the last of the the errors that he makes in his expression of the doctrines and the views espoused by the philosophers. He says that अब अगर इस तनकीद को सामने रखा जाए, he's talking about an excerpt from a work by Ghazali, and he says that अब अगर इस तनकीद को सामने रखा जाए तो तहाफुत की इबारत में जहाँ कदीम आया है वहाँ कदीम से मुराद कदीम ज़ाती है और हादिस से मुराद हादिस ज़मानी है. That is according to him, according to his understanding. लिहाजा इबारत का मतलब यह है कि फिलासफा के नज़दीक कदीम ज़ाती से किसी हादिस ज़मानी का ज़हूर मतलकन मुहाल है. Once again, let me, I mean, uh, uh, this is absolutely false. That is not what the philosophers say. According to the author, the philosophers believe that nothing temporally originated, the impossibility of the emanation in approximate manner of a temporally originated stands only with respect to that which is essentially eternal, meaning God. But in the case of that which is not essentially eternal, but eternal through another, that is, in the case of the immaterial intellects that are contingent in themselves, or mumkin bidat, something temporally originated can emanate from their essence. According to the author, that is the belief of the philosophers. This is nothing but absolute nonsense. That is not what the philosophers believe in. According to the philosophers, nothing temporally originated can emanate in a proximate manner from any eternal cause, regardless of whether that cause is essentially eternal or qadim dhati, or temporally eternal or qadim damani. Regardless of whether it is qadim dhati or qadim damani, nothing temporally originated or hadith zamani can emanate in a proximate manner from any eternal cause, regardless of whether it is necessary in itself or contingent in itself. Okay, why? Because as I just explained, that if something temporally originated were to emanate in a proximate manner from an eternal efficient cause, okay, and that eternal efficient cause, since it is absolutely immaterial and it is devoid of matter and material properties, and it transcends the spatio-temporal dimension and lies beyond motion and matter and time. Therefore it doesn't suffer any change. It is not mobile, it is immobile, it is changeless, it is immutable in its character. Therefore therefore if it is such, so something must have changed, must have some change must have occurred in its essence for something temporally originated to emanate in a proximate manner from the essence of that immaterial efficient cause now rather than earlier. Okay, because if nothing changes within the essence of the immaterial efficient cause, that is an immaterial intellect, so the state of affairs ought to have remained exactly identical. That is, that temporally originated ought to have remained non-existent even now. Okay, but if that temporally originated thing is to emerge out of a state of non-existence into existence, so something must have changed. Something has to change, has to alter within the essence of the immaterial efficient cause in order to justify the temporal emergence of that temporally originated thing now rather than earlier. Okay, otherwise the state of affairs ought to have remained the same. So I would conclude my analysis, my critical analysis of the author's expression and representation, or misrepresentation rather, of the Avicennan doctrine over here, and then later on we can discuss his objection or analysis of my objection, the first objection that I raised in the first episode of my critique against Ghazali.